Falling in love never arrives with a clear beginning. It slips in quietly, often when life feels suspended between hope and disappointment. Most people enter that moment carrying private stories they rarely share. A quiet restlessness. A pull toward meaning. A sense that something is missing but not quite nameable. Love grows in that emotional dusk. It thrives in the cracks left by old fears and unhealed places, which is why the earliest stages always feel larger than they should. You can sense something's shifting long before you admit it. Attraction is rarely just about the other person. It is about the way they make you feel, like your own life suddenly has more color. A glance that lingers a second too long. A conversation that feels strangely easy. A moment where you laugh and then catch yourself noticing how naturally their presence fits into the rhythm of your day. The mind starts narrowing its attention without permission. Small gestures take on weight. A shared joke becomes a signal. A silence becomes a doorway. You begin building meaning out of fragments, and the fragments start shaping the entire emotional landscape. This is where psychology quietly steps in. Falling in love isn't simply a chemical rush, even though the chemicals certainly help. It is an interaction between the past and the present. The people we fall for often echo something in our history. Maybe they offer a softness we once longed for. Maybe they mirror a mystery we have chased for years. Sometimes they touch an old wound without even knowing it, and that wound wakes up, trying to rewrite itself through them. Attachment patterns formed in childhood are suddenly alive again, influencing who feels safe, who feels exciting, and who feels just out of reach enough to feel irresistible. When someone starts mattering, imagination becomes a silent accomplice. You begin projecting stories onto them, not because you want to deceive yourself, but because the early stages of love are a kind of psychological negotiation. You are trying to understand who they are while trying to understand who you might become with them. This is why infatuation feels so intoxicating. The unknown becomes a canvas. Every unanswered question fuels desire. Every slight uncertainty heightens intensity. Chemistry and ambiguity feed each other, blurring the line between what you feel and what you hope for. There is a reason the early phase feels unstable. The foundations of love are still forming. You are balancing between emotional instinct and vulnerability. Part of you wants to lean in. Another part wants to protect itself from leaning too far. This inner conflict creates that unmistakable tension, the kind that keeps you thinking about them at odd hours, replaying conversations, imagining futures that you refuse to acknowledge even to yourself. People often mistake this tension for pure magic, but it is also fear in disguise, the fear of being seen by someone who could actually touch your life in ways you cannot control. As connection deepens, the illusions begin to shift. Idealization softens into something more real. You begin to notice their flaws, yet those flaws don't weaken your interest. They actually create a sense of depth because love becomes less about perfection and more about recognition. You see yourself reflected in their imperfections. You feel understood not because they meet every fantasy, but because they reveal themselves in ways that invite you to reveal yourself too. This is the moment when love becomes frightening in a new way. Vulnerability moves from possibility to reality. You start fearing loss, rejection, or the disappointment of discovering that the story you built in your mind does not fully match who they are. The mind wrestles with exposure. How much should you show? How deeply should you feel? Love demands honesty, yet honesty threatens whatever sense of control you thought you had. And still, people keep falling. Not because love is safe, but because it offers a rare kind of freedom. To fall in love is to let someone rearrange the emotional furniture inside you. It is to allow a new presence to shape your days, influence your choices, and challenge your old defenses. It is a surrender that feels like expansion. A risk that feels like possibility. A trust that grows from small moments of truth, shared without agenda. The psychology of falling in love is not a clean sequence of stages. It is a collision of identity, memory, biology, and imagination. It is the human mind reaching for connection while trying not to collapse under the weight of everything it fears. Love begins as a spark, becomes a mirror, and eventually turns into a doorway that asks you to walk through, knowing you may not emerge unchanged. If anything defines the experience, it is this: falling in love forces you to face yourself in ways nothing else does. It uncovers the parts of you that long for closeness and the parts that fear it. It exposes the contradictions inside you, the softness you hide, the dreams you barely admit, the insecurities that whisper in the dark. And somehow, through all of this uncertainty, love persists. Not because it is simple, but because it makes the world feel more alive, more textured, more meaningful. To fall in love is to surrender to a psychological shift that transforms the way you see the world and the way you see yourself. It is a meeting between two histories, two imaginations, two vulnerabilities. And for a moment, those separate lives move in the same direction, unsure of where they're going, yet willing to keep walking anyway.